Hockey Conference. And on the hot seat, the two coaches of the teams tonight and the press that are on the beat all season long. And so on the first seat, Punch Implach, coach of the Leafs, and our interrogators, Fred Cederberg of the Telegram, Red Burnett of the Star, Rex MacLeod of the Globe and Mail, and Rex, you start.
Well, right off the bat, after seeing that first period there, and I didn't see Billy Harris out on the ice, I was just wondering how a gentleman like Mr. Imlach here is going to keep a centerman like Harris happy. He hasn't been getting too much ice time. He plays well when he's called upon, and the Leafs recently acquired Eddie Litzenberger, who I guess more or less usurped Harris's ordinary roles. Prior to that, he was a fourth centerman. Just what does a coach have to do to reassure a player under those circumstances, Mr. Imlach? I'm just curious as to what particular alchemy you might have to employ under those circumstances.
Well, I didn't think the newspaper men were a bunch of sentimentalists, but apparently you are, because the only reason I could have to play Harris against Nick Keon and Pulford and Kelly would be the fact that I'd have to bench one of them. But as far as putting Litzenberger in center, we've done it for a purpose. We're trying to push him a little bit. We're hoping that we can get him back to a 30-goal man, which is certainly, we're hoping, quite a bit, I have to admit, but we're going to try it. And actually, he's not being groomed as either a centerman or a wingman. He can do both things, possibly a little bit better than what Billy can do them. But as far as reassuring him is concerned, he's still on the hockey club. We haven't fired him. We haven't sent him down. We appreciate his ability. He does a darn good job for us when we ask him to do that, and that's all we're asking for him.
Red?
George, you're down to about 9 men tonight with injuries. You just got back from Rochester. Is there anybody down in Rochester that's ready to come up here in case of an injury like this, an emergency, or one of the older players should slip to the point where he has to be replaced? Have you seen anyone down there?
Well, we have quite a few defensemen down there. Of course, you know we got Hillman down there, and he played his first game last night and did rather well, better than we anticipated. Up in the forward line, we have some pretty good kids, and I would think that Kozak is probably our ace down there as far as left winger is concerned. As far as the right winger is concerned, I think we'd have to give Papin the best shot at it. And in center, Draper played a very good game last night, and we'd have to have a look at him.
Fred?
What about this little boy from Newfoundland? Maybe it's because I'm a Maritimer, but little Alec Faulkner. I know he was injured and he's come back. You saw Rochester. What's the report on Alec Faulkner? You think he's still a year away from the NHL?
Well, I'd have to say that he's certainly a year away. He hasn't become accustomed to the hard knocks yet. He seems to get himself injured, and of course he's got a lot of intestinal fortitude, and he'll keep on coming back, which is the best thing, and I think we're maybe hearing from him in short order.
You mean you think this boy, despite the fact he seems to have few goals and more assists, is potentially a goal-getter?
He's one of the best playmakers in the American Hockey League, and come next year we're going to have a good look at him.
Good enough.
Rex?
Apart from that first period, George, the midterm All-Stars are going to come up pretty soon, and I know you feel very keenly about one particular position. I think it's center. Would you like to, for instance, suggest whom you would select right now as your All-Star center man and take a little heat off some of the selectors who will be under the gun in the next week or so?
Of course, I'm prejudiced. Let's face it. I think that I got...
Apart from that, give us your unbiased opinion.
Well, I wouldn't like to make a choice between Kelly and Keon. I think they both played tremendous hockey for us. You've seen it. Keon, I think, has been an all-star in this rink. I think more than half the games he's played. So you'd have to give him a little bit of an edge, I think.
Give the edge to Keon as against Kelly right now.
Right now.
Over the 35 games, and that's what we have to select on.
How about fellows like Henri Richard, Don McKenney?
Well, gentlemen, I'm going to interrupt here now because we have our next coach coming up, and I know that you'll want to ask some questions of him because he's the coach of the world champions, the Chicago Blackhawks. And at the present time, the Chicago Blackhawks seem to be in a bit of trouble and perhaps might not be even in the Stanley Cup finals to defend their Stanley Cup championship. And I know that the members of the press will have some questions that they'll want to ask Mr. Rudy Pillis. Rudy, you all wired up here for sound? Fred, you start this one off.
Rudy, in between seasons, Bronco Horvath disappeared from a last place club, Boston, and you people picked him up. You also traded Eddie Litzenberger to Detroit for Melnick and a minor leaguer, Brian Smith. And then Detroit let Litzenberger go, washed out from the champions to a team that finished 4th, and a second-place team picked him up. Can you explain these manipulations?
Well, I certainly can't explain the manipulations insofar as what Detroit do or what Toronto do. All I can explain to the point of what I know about Eddie Litzenberger, that we had him for 2 years, and that we thought he played not bad, but he didn't play up to the expectations we thought he should, and therefore management, Tommy Ivan and Mr. Norris, I guess they must have figured that certainly my blessings and sanction, that if they could get something that was younger and could move and fit into our team better, why, it would be wonderful. And so they made the trade, and we all thought it was a wonderful trade, and we still do think it's a wonderful trade. Now, what Detroit found out was wrong with Litzenberger, or why they couldn't get him to go, I don't know. And Punch figures, I guess, maybe that what Detroit didn't know and what we didn't know, he does, and that's what makes the game very interesting, of what you lose on the peaches, you pick up on the grapes, I guess.
Red?
In other words, you think he might think he has the whole card for Listenberger, just like
Well,
they say in the racing game.
that's true. It depends on what you call a whole card. They played Litzenberger with Gordon Howe. Now, I'd say he's a pretty good hockey player to play with, and he's made a lot of mediocre hockey players look great. And apparently it didn't pan out so good. So it depends on the style or type of hockey player you're with and the team you're with.
Gentlemen, looks like we've got time for one last question, Red.
Reddy, getting back to this current team of yours, tonight they seem to flop 50 chances for every goal they scored. They're making an extra pass. What gives with them? Last year in the Stanley Cup Finals, it was bing, bing, it was in the net.
I think only this, because at the Stanley Cup Finals, we're talking about a team that was hitting everything was going for them. Now we're playing under pressure to the point that we've lost quite a few games, but we're a healthy club, and now we're trying to gain ground, and maybe you might be hanging on the puck just a second too soon or getting rid of it too soon under pressure. And they're certainly trying, and I know the way they're skating out there, but the puck isn't rolling for them.
Gentlemen, I'll have to interrupt. Thank you very, very much, Rudy Pillis, and also to Punch Imlach, the coaches on the hot seat, and of course to Fred Cederberg, Red Burnett, and Rex